Welcome in. You are listening to the first ever Gridiron Grubb podcast. Gridiron Grubb is going to be all about, well, football. We're going to be on the air Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, coming at you with as much information as I can give you. Um, and I just hope that I can help you out in your football IQ, your football knowledge, your fantasy sports, and everything that comes along with it. And that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm here to do. Um, we're going to talk fantasy football, pro football, college football. I'm going to come at you live Fridays with some Friday Night Lights segments for some high school, players to watch out for in the future, college, high school, upcoming stars. You're going to see them all on here. Eventually, you'll see them all. Right now, you're going to just hear from me. So that's where we're at. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not loud and obnoxious most of the time unless I'm watching the game. But we'll figure it out. We'll get to know each other over time. I hope to, like I say, bring some championship aspirations to your fantasy teams, some good undercover knowledge. I've done this for a long time. I dig deep into these guys, these players, this sport. I love it. Now, there'll be a little bit of other sports on here because I got to talk about a little bit of other sports. I'm just a sports guy. But football is my life, and football is what I love, and football is what I do. So that's going to be the main points of the Gridiron Grubb podcast going forward. And with that said, getting you a little measured up here to what we're going to be talking about for most of the time, I'm going to kind of head right into it here. So a lot of the talk that I'll be doing will be Dynasty fantasy football, redraft leagues, whatever you guys want to talk about. We'll get into a little bit of sports gambling now that all that's legal. So we'll just come at you live with the best we can, with the best sports, mainly football. But I got to interject a little bit of my loves of hockey, and right now I'm watching NBA playoffs, so you got to love that. A little shout out to my sons that watched put up a whooping. Well, I can't call it a whooping on the Clippers today, game one. Yesterday, Devin Booker putting up 40. That was huge. So, I got to spit out some love to those type of things. It's been a long time for the Suns to be good, so I gotta put them in there a little bit. Anyway, without ado, let's kind of get around to some fantasy. And first, I wanted to talk about, and this is going to mainly, for your redraft leagues, Najee Harris, obviously the rookie running back. Probably going to go off the board pretty early for a rookie. Everybody's pretty excited about him. And that's okay. I get it. He's got all the talent in the world, and he deserves that in redraft leagues. The guy just that I like more in a dynasty era, in this dynasty time of fantasy football, I'm in love with Etienne. I really am. And there's some reasons why behind this. And yes, in dynasty, I way prefer Etienne over Najee Harris. And people were going to call me crazy, but I think it comes down to this, and I've written about it. If you want to check out in my blog, I did top 30 Dynasty League rookies. But Najee, I love again all the talent in the world. This kid, he's gonna be good. So it's not like you're getting a bum or something because you drafted him over Etienne. I just like the long term and Dynasty fantasy. Like I say, in redraft this year, Najee Harris, guy to probably go with. Unless you're in PPR, then you might start considering Etienne even, because the kid's going to catch a ton of passes. Look, Urban Meyer, everybody a little upset that Etienne is playing wide receiver during minicamp, but I'm just telling you, that's for a reason. He knows how to play running back, and he knows how to play running back with Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be his NFL quarterback. So, I just feel like, so with Urban Meyer, right? Dude loves bubble screens, loves H backs. So he goes ahead and he puts his favorite guy in there to run H back, right? And run these bubble screens to, and hand the ball off to in the backfield coming on motions, pitch the ball to, throw screens to. I'm just telling you right now, ETN has special for years written all over him with young quarterback, and I just like what I see from that, you know, portion of this offseason so far. Now, don't get me wrong, Najee, you can check out. He's been making just amazing plays in minicamp, and he's got amazing footwork, and the dude's going to be an amazing player. This is where I get at that. What are the Steelers going to be? Yes, this year they're going to have still Big Ben. He's going to be back there slinging the rock, handing it off. But again, their line, I don't know about that O-line. It was really pathetic for him last year. I mean, Ben was having to throw 50 and 60 times a game, and that was all O-line. That wasn't anything but the O-line's fault last year. And everybody, Big Ben loves to pass and audible to passes. Well, when you can't average more than, 2 yards a carry at best, I just don't see why he wouldn't audible to a pass. So, this guy is good, and he knows his game. But what worries me is going forward, and this is what I say. This year, Najee going to look great as a rookie. I think Etienne's going to have his moments. Now, Dynasty football, I just think Etienne is the guy. I do. I just think he's the guy out of this draft. And the reason why I say that, again, is because longevity. Dynasty fantasy football, what are you going to do for me over a period of time? Or what are you going to bring me in capital over the next year or two? When somebody wants to trade for you, is somebody going to give me, a mind-boggling trade that, builds my fantasy for years to come, a dynasty fantasy team, and that's the thing that I'm looking for. So I just think ETN right this year, it might be a little quiet. I don't know, and I still don't think that. But my problem is the Steelers for Najee. Big Ben, it's going to be his last year. Let's just be honest. If he makes it past this year and he plays one more year, good for him. I just don't see it. His body is beat up. Big dude. He's taken a beating from all of his pump fakes and standing in the pocket all of his career, which is a special move for him, and he's amazing at it, and he makes amazing things happen from it. But he's taking a pounding for it. I know he's a big dude, but his body's taking a pounding, and how long's his arm going to hold up? As everybody kind of saw last year, the arm strength was there with some pop on some certain passes, but it wasn't there on others. And, I just don't know if he lasts. If he does last more than this season, I will be shocked a little bit. And but we never know in the NFL with these dudes. They want to keep playing and they keep pushing it longer. But I think the way he restructured his contract, he's putting it all in for this year. They got a special rookie. These receivers came back for a year. Juju Smith-Schuster and all these guys. So they're going to be good this year. But what's going to happen next year? Is it going to be Mason Rudolph? Is that who's going to take over the helm? Dwayne Haskins? The problem is they're going to be too good this year to get a spectacular rookie out of the draft next year as a quarterback. Are they going to bring in a vet next year? You don't know. So that's what worries me about Najee in a dynasty draft. I think the dude's going to be special. But look at Barkley, with the Giants. This guy with the G, man. The poor dude's had to carry such a load. How long is he going to last? Like if I was a Saquon Barkley owner in a dynasty league right now, you're not going to get as much as you would probably going into last season. But I would look at, especially get into the season a couple games and he has some really good games, right? Get him in there. And, man, I'd look at, again, trading him for a boatload. Dynasty is about your future, just like the NFL. It's about your future. And if you're playing in dynasties that you got salary caps and all these things, it gets down to deep and dirty in some of these where you are like a real NFL team with you got salary caps. Anyway, what I'm saying about this is ETN, if you want dynasty specialty and a guy who has dynasty longevity written all over him, ETN is the man to me. He really is. And, Urban Meyer, let's just say he doesn't make it in the pros, right? Let's say he Chip Kelly's it, or, well, let's just be honest. Nick Saban, Chip Kelly, you name them, college coaches that come in and they're going to be, the next greatest thing ever to hit the league, and it's not true. Matt Rule, we'll see. He's actually doing, Carolina held their own last year. We'll see. He has, more of a real pro-style offense coming in. Urban Meyer kind of has that going on. He's produced a lot of pro-style players. So, but again, so did Nick Saban. Now, Chip Kelly, I think, was a guy who came in and tried to, rah-rah, bring the college scene to the pros, and those dudes don't get down like that. So, but Urban Meyer, he's gonna get the ball to Etienne, and so is Trevor Lawrence. Who do you think Trevor Lawrence? Okay, so he's a rookie. Who's he gonna trust most on this team? The guy that he's played with for his entire career so far, as going into as a young adult and now an adult, playing in the man's league. You know what? Who's he gonna trust? Who's he going to drop the ball off to? Who's he going to hand it to in the 8? Who's he going to throw the bubble screen? Who's he going to want on the field with him? And yes, James Robinson, great. Came out of nowhere last year. Great, free agent signing in the offseason, undrafted. Had a spectacular season. Got it. Guy's there. He's going to run the ball. But your third down guy, your second down guy, I'm telling you right now, he's going to get him on the field, and he's going to give Etienne the ball. That's what Urban Meyer does. And you watch. The guys that he has on his teams that have special talent, go back and look at the tapes. Ted Ginn Jr., look at the guys that he's had. They get the ball. Handoffs, H-backs, bubble screens. Whatever you want to, call the position, he puts that guy in slot position, H-back position. He motions him into the backfield, pitches the ball. I mean, that's what his offense is, and Etienne's going to get the ball. Not that Najee, again, is not going to get the ball. Not that Najee doesn't have special talents. I just see it as return on investment. It's an ROI situation for me in Dynasty, and I think that's where we're going. Harris, he's going to be good. But what's the team he's going to have around him over the next couple years? That's what worries me. Are you going to be able to have a team that they just line up in the box? I mean, what's he going to do? Like at Alabama, and you're in college, right? If they pack the box, for most teams, unless you are Alabama yourself, you don't have, 3 and 4 special secondary members out there to cover everybody. So they can't stack the box against these guys at Alabama. If they do, and you see what happens, these dudes like Waddle, Ridley, Julio Jones. I mean, you name it, the list goes on and on at receiver. They're going to burn you. So what's going to happen in the next few years when Big Ben's not there? Because I tell you what, if I was a coach and Mason Rudolph's out there, I'm making him beat me. I'm lining up in the box. Najee Harris is not going to beat me. And then, like I say, what happens to the receiving core in the next few seasons? Juju stay there, Deontay Johnson, all these guys that, their contracts are rookie, are they going to extend them? Will they stay there? Do they want to stay there? What's the situation? I know it's great to play for the Steelers, but I just see a situation where, maybe they have to go to just playing strictly great defense over a 3 or 4 year span. And, Najee will be good. He will be good. But will he be special? And I just think Etienne has special written on him, and I think Najee has special written on him as his talent. I just don't see it as far as, what's going to be around him over the next, over the near future. Maybe you draft him this year and he has this ball-out season, right? And my suggestion would be pay attention to what Big Ben does, and maybe somebody's willing to give you again a fortune at the end of the season for Najee. And you take the chance of Big Ben dropping out of the game here, this season or next, and you end up with a plethora of drafts and good players for your fantasy team. That's where it's at. So now moving on from that, it was great and all, and but I want to kind of move into a trade, obviously, that shook a little bit of the offseason that everybody knew was coming. They didn't know who it was going to. Most of the talk, again, was the Titans, and obviously we're talking about Julio Jones. Where does that movement happen, right? Where does that move, not just the redraft scales, the dynasty scales, the football scales? What about, Henry? Does that make Henry a better back? I just don't. I see him as the same guy. Everybody got really excited, like, oh, look at him now. But last year with Davis and AJ Brown, they were killing it. They were killing it. So it's not like guys didn't have to cover these receivers. Teams weren't lining everybody up in the box, and when they did, both those receivers were burning everybody. So, and of course, last year, they tried to do 8-man boxes. They tried to do these, tried to cover receivers. Well, it totally toasted them, and so is Julio better than Corey Davis? Yes, obviously, but how much better as far as a scheme? Does that change what defenses do? I mean, last year they were having to try to double AJ, and then it was leaving Davis open. So, but are teams gonna just worry about Henry? No, so they're not. So, again, I think Henry, it's tough on these guys. This dude's pounded the rock for a few years now. Lots and lots and lots of carries. Lots. So, where does that leave him as far as a body? Again, Henry going into this season, and this years ago, this is what I did with Le'Veon Bell when the trouble started. So, the year that Le'Veon Bell, he set for like 4 games, I think it was the first season when it all started. So I kept him that year. I used him, made a little run with him. At the end of the season, he'd done good enough, right? This dude gave me the draft of the trade of a lifetime, and I thought, this guy, I think Bell, I just kind of, you could see it coming, right? There was talks. So guy gave me first round, I think it was 6th overall, and Cooper Kupp, who had just had a spectacular rookie year, and Marvin Jones for the Lions, who has just been solid for me for the 2 years that I've had him since this trade. And that first round 6 overall pick ended up being Lamar Jackson. So I got Lamar Jackson, Cooper Kupp, and Marvin Jones for Le'Veon Bell, who basically has been fantasy irrelevant since I made the trade. And I mean completely irrelevant. So now I'm not saying obviously Henry's not in that category, but here's what Henry's category is. If you are on a dynasty team that has, let's say you're getting through the season, you've got Derrick Henry, maybe you're competing, but maybe you're not going to make the playoffs. Oh my God, I would just take the boat for the guy. Yeah, he's going to last a couple more seasons, but not running at the pace he runs. It's just not going to happen. I know he's a locomotive, and maybe he plays for a long time. You look at the guys like Gore, Adrian Peterson, their bodies, these dudes are brick shithouses, right? So these dudes can get down for years because their bodies are just in shape like that, and Henry reminds me of that. Obviously Henry he's solid. So does he last, 2-3 more seasons as being like, let's just say let's go Adrian Peterson, right? Even towards 28, 29, 30, right? He could still put it up, but it was starting to slide as far as how much he was put on the field, and I think that's going to happen to Henry. And I think this year, even going into the offseason, if you have a great player and he has a season that you're looking at as far as getting a great trade for him, that would be the guy that I trade for, or trade, to get a giant return on investment. Again, if you're in Dynasty, now obviously if you're in a redraft league, you're going to keep the guy on your team all year. There's no point in trading him. Doesn't matter. You draft that guy, he's on your team in a redraft league. On a Dynasty, this might be the year to hit him up. And I think with the Julio Jones trade, it's only going to further that connection, right? So I think the player to get and the player to beat, or the player to have out of this whole trade would be Derrick Henry to use as a trade bait. And I mean, you can probably get a boatload for him. And the thing with Dynasty, you get a lot of guys, they're not looking at the future. They're like, I want to win this year, right? And so they'll trade for all the big names, and they think that's going to be the way to do it. And it doesn't always happen that way. It's actually, I mean, in the Dynasty leagues I'm in, it rarely happens. These dudes go out, they trade everything they have for, they've got 6 big names on their roster, and they have a decent season. The problem is buys, injuries, and they don't have a deep bench, especially playing in like a super flex Dynasty. You're going to be in trouble. But guys love it. So like I say, you go out, you get yourself a couple first-round picks, a couple, a running back, a good wide receiver. I mean, I'm all in on that, right? So I think the Julio Jones trade is something that needs to be put into perspective with as far as what you're going to be for a running back. And if that's something you want to do as far as a trade, that would be what I jump on right now. Something that's special, something that you can get, again, this huge return on investment. And yes, I know you're giving up Henry, but, I just think that's the way to go. I think even if you're in like a super flex, having Ryan Tannehill over the next couple years can be great. Trading Ryan Tannehill for good money because you came back for the Julio Jones, A.J. Brown show, and you can get good money out of that trade, that's another place that you can go that's special. So that's as far as the Julio Jones trade, as far as Dynasty and Superflex, and obviously in the redraft leagues, you're going Henry. I really think in the redraft leagues it makes it tough on which receiver do you take. I think it really downgraded Julio. I think it strengthens AJ. I really do. The strength as far as a redraft, or if you have him this year, what are they going to do? I think most teams are going to try to. I really do think they're going to try to go after Julio, or maybe they go the other way and they say Julio's got the older body, and we'll push it with him. But I don't know. I see them kind of, as Julio, he's got that down the sideline catch. He's so great along the sidelines. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to have to put safeties over the top of him, not for his burner speed, but just the way that he runs routes. I think there's got to be a safety that, kind of shadows him. So maybe AJ turns out a huge season this year. Everybody was kind of like it might have knocked him down a notch. I think it actually knocked Julio down a notch. And, because look what's going on in Atlanta, right? It wasn't Julio putting up all the giant numbers. It was the receiver opposite of him. And I think that stays the same for now. And maybe it changes next year. Maybe Julio, he's been having hamstring issues. Maybe he doesn't pop off like he's been popping off. So, yeah, as a person who looks at this as far as judgment and evaluation, I just think AJ is going to be special out of it. I think Derrick Henry going to be just as good. 2,000 yards years, back-to-back years. That's tough. That's tough. But I do think the Titans are going to throw more with having the balance that they have now, with two top dogs on the outside. So that may be something that people try to guesstimate over this offseason. But I just think A.J. Brown's special. Julio, I think, takes the knock in the trade. Um, I don't see it being better for Henry. I just, I don't. I think he's going to be the same guy. Guys are having to play the same defense they were having to play last year. So I think Henry stays the same. A.J. Brown, to me, skyrockets. And Julio, he kind of stays the same to me where he was at in Atlanta. To me, in fantasy, he wasn't a top 10 wide receiver anymore. When he's on the field, he is, but his hammies have not been, his hammies and thighs and all these things haven't been holding up for him. So, again, I would look at AJ having the better situation out of all of this. And that's that. Now, for Dynasty, the sneaky, I think you can get on the cheap. People are a little fed up. Had 2 bad seasons. Even in redraft, you can draft him, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th round. And that is OBJ. Yes, Odell Beckham Jr. This guy, he's been putting in the work. I think, he's been such a diva over his career, and he's talked a lot of crap, and he's run his mouth, and he's had his moments, and he's been special, and then he's been unspecial. And I just think with the injury last year, some of these guys that are like that, you better watch out. The dude's been putting in the work in the off season. We've been seeing all the social media posts about what he does and what he's been doing, and the players saying how special he is. I mean, I just think it's going to be really special for this guy. Look, Baker was a rookie. Then Baker was a sophomore quarterback. Then Odell's hurt. Baker now has his game down. He knows who he is as far as an NFL player. I think it's a big year for Odell and Landry. And I just think on the cheap, especially in a dynasty, I think you can get Odell Beckham on the cheap. Guys are fed up with him. He's coming off the injury. Before camp, if you can go pull the trigger and have this dude show up, I mean, pretty special if you can get it done. And that's just how I feel. So if you can go out and you can get Odell for the cheap, like let's say a 2nd round pick, and like an average running back, or a 2nd round pick and an average wide receiver, I think you're going to have a huge ROI over the next couple of years. And again, yeah, Beckham, he's 29 in this season, but again, here's a guy that you could get return on investment. You get him cheap this year. He balls out during the season. Again, maybe you make maybe you trade a 2nd for him this year, but then you get a 1st and who knows what out of that to come back to you. So again, in dynasty leagues, return on investment as far as redraft leagues where you can draft him, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the risk. Get him 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round. I mean, he can drop. People are a little worried, skeptical. I'd take him. I'd take him. I really would. I wouldn't let it scare me off from that trade. And yeah, I mean, he just looks like, I think in this offseason something triggered in him. These guys they go, oh man, my career, my season, everything could be over just like that. And I think it was a light bulb moment for the guy. And I think he's going to come out and he's going to be special next year. I really do. I really think he's going to be special during this season. And he's going to be a guy to watch. And again, in Dynasty, I think you get him on the cheap. I really do. Now, I made a trade for him and but the guy offered me. Let's just be honest. Last year, I drafted Justin Jefferson, and I had won the league, so I had the 12th pick in this dynasty league I'm talking about, and I drafted Jefferson in the 12th spot, and yeah, he was special last year. But this guy, he had the 6th overall pick this year, the 13th overall pick this year, and gave me Odell Beckham Jr. So in my draft, and this is a super flex league, so I'm probably looking at getting, just depending on how the chips fall ahead of me, if 2 or 3, maybe even 4 quarterbacks go, I'm looking at having Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Etienne. I also have the 10th overall pick, so I'm looking at Javon Williams, Devontae Smith, and then the 13th overall pick, so I'm looking at Rashad Bateman. So, where does it fall? I don't know, but it's a chance I was willing to take, right? So I take OBJ, and then I'm going to have, out of this draft, I'm actually going to have, because I have the 10th pick in the second, is I have the first pick, the 10th pick in the second, and I've got the 6th pick and the 10th pick in the first. So I'm looking at having 4 top 20 rookies this year, plus Odell Beckham. And again, return on investment. So, let's say Bateman, again, let's say I get Bateman at 2-1. He ends up being the Jefferson of this season, right? So even trade, plus I get Odell, plus I'm going to get either one of the top running backs, the top tight ends, or the top receivers. I'm going to either get the number 1 tight end, the number 2 rated running back, who's actually my first rated running back, or the number 1 wide receiver. Like, I'm going to get one of those guys. So, again, that's rated on the board. Those are where those guys are rated. And if I end up with that, I'm happy. So I will be super appreciative of that return on investment if that happens. So like I say, don't be afraid to go out this year. And like I say, what if Odell just balls out this year, right? So I'm looking at having this receiver, and next year I can get a first or a couple firsts or who knows what for him, right? And so my return on investment from Justin Jefferson, so you shouldn't be afraid to trade guys, right? Who knows, right? So this could be your Laramie Tunzel moment like the Dolphins had. Again, you trade a good player, Justin Jefferson. You can't be attached to these dudes, right? You're building a dynasty league. So you can't be attached to these dudes. However, you also just want to give them away. And again, it's about return on investment. So, OBJ, let's say he balls out this year and I end up with a first and, another running back or another wide receiver next year for him, a first, second, maybe a first and a first. And look at the huge return I get for Justin Jefferson. So that's why I say don't be attached to everybody, but also look for these guys. Odell balls out this year, everybody's going to go back into loving him, right? And while everybody's loving him and he's hot, just like Le'Veon Bell, right? The guy missed 3 or 4 games. I think they reduced it to 2 or something like that the season I traded him. But then he had a great season, and then I got rid of him because he was. You could just see. Now, did we all know that he wasn't going to play the entire next season? No, but you could just see he was going out of Pittsburgh, and he didn't know where he was going to go, and he was disgruntled. And how many players do that, and they go to the next team, and it's just garbage, right? Randy Moss. Remember when Randy Moss went to the Raiders? I mean, so you just never know what's going to happen with these guys. Are they going to be spectacular? You just don't know. They could be the biggest name Hall of Famer. They go to the next team. So I just kind of saw that in Le'Veon. And what I'm saying this year that I see in Odell is that I see this chance to get a guy in a dynasty league that can have huge return on investment. Not only get you good points this year on the cheap, but then maybe even make you a great future, a good future return on investment after this season. So look at guys like that, and don't be afraid to pull the trigger on some of these things. Don't get robbed, but don't be afraid to pull the trigger. All right, so moving on. The last thing I'm going to talk about. This is my rookie sleeper. I mean sleeper, and there's a little bit of talk about him if you dig out there. But that's going to be Frank Darby from Arizona State. With the Falcons, and I know they got Gage, right? And so he's supposed to be the guy. Now that Julio left, Calvin Ridley's going to be the man. And then Gage is supposed to just watch for Frank Darby. I know he slid in the draft to the I don't think the Falcons got him until the 6th round. But that doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you right now, the dude's body, he doesn't have, I think he's probably 2 inches shorter than Julio. I think he's 6'1". But the dude's built like Julio. And trust me, in college, playmaker. He was a top 5 receiver in college coming out into this draft. Top 5. Slid to the 6th. They talk about his catch radius, right? And that's why he slid. People were afraid. And then what happens is once a guy slides a little bit, a round or two, people forget about him. They go into their draft boards and they're drafting people. Then they come back and they go, oh, hey, this guy's still there. Wow. And they take him. Trust me, that's probably what happened in Atlanta's draft room. So as they took this guy, nobody knew. I think they had some intentions in the offseason. Well, obviously they knew they were. I didn't know if they knew for official during the draft that they were going to trade Julio. I really don't. Everybody was like, I got traded in June. So it was if a deal came around and they wanted, a lot for Julio. But I think Frank Darby is going to be, just watch out for him. He's going to be one of those guys. He was a playmaker at Arizona State. He makes big plays. Go look at his highlights. Look him up. And they talk about his catch radius, not, catching over players and, high pointing the ball, all that type of stuff. Go look at his highlights. And those are things that, trust me, NFL coaches are going to work on timing on those things and, running to the ball, reaching, all the points they talk about. And they're going to make him, and I would watch that guy. Dynasty, if he's there in the 4th round of, say, your rookie draft, I'd jump all over him. And he may slide up, actually. He may jump up a little bit in the fantasy drafts with the news that's been going on as far as rookies. But if he's there, late 3rd, and into the 4th round of your rookie draft, I'd take him. This is a guy I would take a huge shot on. He may come out. There's a guy I drafted the very last draft, the last year when I drafted Justin Jefferson, actually, in this Dynasty League. I drafted, well, not last year because it was the year before. So the year before I drafted in the 4th round, it was I think I was the 10th pick that year too, or 11th. Maybe I went to the championship with him. Anyway, Hunter Renfrow, and I loved it. I couldn't believe he was there in my mind because I'd watched what he'd done in Clemson. Now, he hadn't had a special senior season, but his junior season, amazing. Anyway, look at this guy. I wish he'd have gotten to a better situation than the Raiders because I think he'd be even more special. God, if he'd have gotten to a place like New England where they use these guys in the slot like that, and you better watch for him. If he leaves Las Vegas, if he leaves the Raiders and he goes on to, let's say, the Patriots, you better watch out for him because if he goes to a place where they utilize the slot guy like that, the possession slot receiver, he's going to be something. With the Raiders, I think he does good. But still, anyway, this guy was into the draft. You got to look for these guys late. And I think Frank Darby this year, I think he's a guy who can be special. I think he can actually come in and be the number 2 there. Be special. You can be special out of the slot. He's a great guy. I'm telling you right now, he's great. My 2nd round, guy that I, love is from USC, so they wear the same colors, same Pac-12 as, Amon-Ra St. Brown. The guy's going to be, I think, good. But Frank Darby, late in a dynasty draft, that's the guy I would look for. All right, so that's going to wrap up my first ever episode. I appreciate the listen. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and anything you want to do. I'm here for you. So don't forget and join me every Monday, Wednesday, Friday until I decide to take a break. And but other than that, I'm gonna be coming at you live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and talking football with you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.